I'm your teacher, Miss Madlazi, and I'm so excited to see you. Today, I want us to review some of the economic concepts which were covered in grade 10. Specifically, we're looking at the definition of economics as a subject. We're also looking at the circular flow model, factors of production, and their remuneration. Right. So, what is economics? It is the study of how individuals, businesses, governments, and other organizations within our society choose to use scarce resources to satisfy their numerous needs and wants in a manner which is efficient and equitable. Remember that efficiency is avoiding waste, and being equitable means making sure that there is no gap between the rich and the poor, or at least the gap is very, very small. I want you to remember this definition of what is economics so that you can easily identify it maybe in multiple choice questions, or so that you are also able to understand and explain what economics is as a discipline. Two, economics is underpinned by what we call the basic economic problem of scarcity. Right? Scarcity is us having unlimited wants when we have limited resources to satisfy these wants. For example, think about your trip to the tuck shop today. During lunchtime, you had a specific amount of money, and that money determined what exactly you could buy. You might have wanted a pizza, but your money said, no, you are going to get a hot dog. And that is, even on a bigger scale, a problem that governments and businesses and other organizations experience. They might have certain goals that they want to achieve for the country. They might have certain amounts that they want to spend for certain services, but the resources are simply not always there, or they are limited. Therefore, we have to do things like budgets, where we allocate certain amounts of money to certain departments so that we can satisfy the needs and wants of society. So the basic economic problem of scarcity is very important to remember and to explain, because that is where we also introduce the concept of opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of having to choose a burger over a pizza because of money is a very important part of economics, because we have to do it every day simply because the resources are limited. Whether those resources are money, whether those resources are things like gold and other natural minerals, we have always the issue of scarcity, and therefore we have to make opportunity costs. Please remember the definition of scarcity and the definition of opportunity cost as well. Let's read together here. All economies are faced with the task of responding to the scarcity problem and uneven distribution of resources. There are an estimated 7 billion people in the planet, all of which have the same basic needs. How do we ensure that everyone is well taken care of while limiting wastage of resources and socio-economic inequality? Households, government, businesses, the foreign sector, and other organizations are called economic participants. All these stakeholders play an inherently special and unique role to ensure that the economy functions well. This second point is about the circular flow model. We know that we have two kinds of circular flow models, where an open economy will have the foreign sector, but a closed economy will not have the foreign sector, because that government or that nation will be self-sufficient and they will not need to supplement some resources by trading in imports and exports. So South Africa is an open economy, which is why we have the foreign sector. Then we have households, which is you and me. We have the government, we have businesses, and then we have other organizations as well, such as non-governmental organizations or NGOs. Let's look at the circular flow model, where we look at basically the needs or the role of the government. Let's look at the role of the government. Here, the government is at the center of the economy. So it regulates how households and how businesses will interact. Right? So the government will set different rules and regulations and policies that will regulate the relationship between businesses and households. For example, we have things like the Labor Relations Act, where people are contracted to work at least a certain amount of hours per day, and they have to be paid the minimum wage. All those are things that the government decides in order to make sure that households are not exploited by producers or firms. right? In addition to being a regulator of the economy, the government is also a consumer because they buy certain goods and services from these businesses or producers or firms in order to provide certain goods and services to schools, hospitals, and other government organizations or institutions. So, we have mentioned that the government plays a very central role in the effective running and management of the economy, and you might know about state owned enterprises. So, state owned enterprises are run by the government, and the government is also called the public sector because the kinds of enterprises that they run are for the benefit of the public. For example, we have ESCOM, which is responsible for administering the production of electricity. We have in Johannesburg, we have Johannesburg Water or Rand Water, which is responsible for the production and distribution of water. So the government doesn't only set rules and regulations that will help us, know how to behave, rules about minimum wage and so on, but it's also responsible for providing public goods and services such as water and electricity and housing and schools and public hospitals and so on. So yes, the state provides households and businesses with public goods and services. And you might be asking yourself, where do they get the money for these things? And the answer is they get it from taxes. So households and businesses have to pay tax every month or every year, depending on their income, and that tax, direct and indirect tax, is then used to provide public goods and services. Direct tax is deducted from a person's monthly income. If you earn a salary, you will be taxed directly. But indirect tax is paid through things such as value added tax, where if you buy maybe a product that is taxable, let's say you buy a packet of meat, there is 15% of value added tax that will be charged on that product. And that tax is what contributes towards the government's pocket or the government's national income fund that will then be allocated for different public goods and services. So I guess what I'm trying to emphasize with this point is that all the participants in the circular flow, they are interdependent. That's a word that you always need to remember. They are interdependent, they rely on each other, they cannot survive on their own. As I'm showing you now, that with the government, they need the taxes from households and businesses to provide public goods and services, and households do need the government to provide these public goods and services in order for them to survive. So there is a very important factor there of interdependency. So the revenue that is generated by government from taxes is plowed back into the economy through government spending via the different departments. The Department of Basic Education, for example, will be responsible for building schools and getting textbooks and providing feeding scheme food. And the Department of Correctional Services will be responsible for running the prisons and so on. So all these departments have their different responsibilities, and they get the money from the government to fulfill those obligations. All right. And then next we have households. This is a word that also means consumers. Households are the same people who will consume the different goods and services that are produced by businesses or firms. So households are also very important in the circular flow model because they are the primary economic participants and they are the owners of the four factors of production. The four factors of production are labor, land, entrepreneurship, and capital. Households own all of these and they are able to sell them or provide them accordingly for a remuneration or for a reward. And then households are also called consumers. This is because they spend their income on goods and services provided by producers and firms. Households will then receive a remuneration from the firms or from the government in the form of wages, rent, interest, and profit when they sell their factors of production. So you should be able to match each factor of production with its relevant remuneration. For example, for labor, the remuneration is the salary or wages. For capital, the remuneration is interest, and so on. Then households contribute towards national income because they pay direct and indirect taxes to the government. As I've mentioned, we can pay taxes such as value added tax every time we purchase a good or pay for a service, or we can also pay as you earn, which is a tax that is levied on our income. And governments also pay corporate tax. So there's different kinds. Businesses also pay corporate tax. So there's different kinds of taxes that will be paid. All right, so that is the contribution of the households to the economy, and I hope you also keep that in mind. Next up, we need to think about the firms themselves. So just hold on for me. All right. So the firms are also called businesses, or they are also called producers. So they purchase factors of production from households. And as I mentioned earlier, these factors of production are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Firms use the factors of production to produce goods and services. Every business needs people who will work there to provide different expertise and skills and the power or the labor that is needed. These days, there's a lot of talk or conversation about robots and how robots will replace a lot of labor in the future. We'll see how that goes. But for now, most of the labor is provided by people, especially in South Africa. And then the business now will sell the goods and services that have been produced. They will sell these to the household and to the government or the foreign sector. If that economy is an open economy, it means that it can sell some of its surplus products to other countries. For example, we know that a lot of the products we use in South Africa are sold to our neighboring countries. So, for example, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Swaziland and Lesotho. And then some of the products that we use in South Africa, we bought from China. So we are able to buy clothing items and cell phones and sneakers and all those things from other countries as well. So the benefit of having an open economy is that you can buy and sell to other countries as well. So businesses receive an income from the other three participants. We have households, we have the government, and we have the foreign sector. As I've mentioned, the government buys or purchases goods from businesses in order to provide them as public goods to households. For example, if the government buys textbooks from a publishing company, they are buying them to provide them to learners at schools. So that is very important that the government can purchase in very, very big quantities certain goods and then provide them to households as public goods and services. So that is the role that is played by these participants, which are the firms or the businesses. And then next, I've already touched a bit on the foreign sector. So the foreign sector is comprised by the international market, and this is where imports and exports are traded. You also need to remember the definitions of each terms here, such as import, which is the products that we will buy from other countries, and exports, which are products that are traded to other countries. We sell exports to other countries. And a country that trades with other countries, as I've mentioned, is called an open economy, while a country that does not trade with other countries is called a closed economy. There aren't many closed economies in the world. I think if we think about countries such as North Korea, these are very, very few examples of countries that do not trade with other countries. And they don't make this a choice. It's not like they wake up and they choose, oh, we don't want to trade with other countries, because that makes life very, very difficult. Usually, the reason why an economy becomes a closed economy is because they have been excluded by other countries, maybe because they don't uphold the rights of their citizens, or maybe there's something wrong that's happening. Maybe there's a dictatorship. So usually, a closed economy isn't something that happens by choice, but it becomes a consequence of the country's actions. And lastly, we have the real and the money flow. So this is the flow of money, goods, and services in the economy as the different economic participants interact through trade and consumption. The real flow are all the factors of production that flow from the owners, which are households, to producers via the factor market. So we know that goods and services flow from the producers via the goods market to households and other users of goods and services. Factors of production and and services flow from the foreign country to South Africa as imports, and from South Africa to foreign countries as exports. So that is the real flow. It's basically the flow of goods and services between the different economic participants. Then we have the money flow, which is all the remuneration that is rewarded to factors of production and the expenditure of producers and consumers. As I mentioned earlier, the factors of production are labor, entrepreneurship, capital, and what else? And land. And the remuneration will be wages, rent, interest, and profit. So that is the money flow. It's basically the flow of money between the economic participants as a result of exchanging the factors of production. Whenever a factor of production moves in the economy through labor, maybe through the allocation of land, through investment in the form of capital, all of those factors of production will be rewarded or remunerated, and that is the flow of money. So yeah, in the circular flow, the 6 things you need to remember. Firstly, all the 4 participants. These are households, businesses, government, and the foreign sector for open economies. Then you need to remember the real and the money flow. So those are 6 different points that you could use, especially if you're writing an essay. Yeah, I think that's where I'll end it.